Welcome to the Magna AI podcast, where we sit down with principals, district leaders, and instructional innovators who are reshaping what's possible in the classroom with a little help from AI. Together, we explore how school leaders are using smart tools and bold ideas to support teachers, personalize learning, and improve outcomes for every student. Hello, hi listeners. Welcome to Magna AI podcast. We have a wonderful episode here today, and with us we have Dr. Kelly Coffin, who has been serving as a superintendent of Farmington Public Schools in Michigan. The district that Dr. Coffin is leading comprises of 2 high schools and 1 alternate high school and 3 middle schools, 9 elementary schools, and 1 K to 8 STEAM school. So I'm sure that's keeping you busy. So, Dr. Coffin, do you want to take a couple of minutes to talk to us about your background, how you actually got here, and then what keeps you excited every day?
Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. So, I have been in education my entire career. That's not my family wasn't in education, so I'm not somebody that grew up in a teaching family. But I had a school counselor who thought, you'll make a great teacher. So, I started my career in special education, and my first my first about 4.5 years, I worked in a facility for adjudicated youth, and so I worked with females ages 13 to 18 who had made some really poor decisions very early in their life. And I think that was really, when I look back, a very consequential moment for me because it helped me to know that we work through the strengths of people. It's very easy to look at the areas for growth or the areas where they've made missteps, but it was harder to actually find strengths, especially when in the population I was serving who had made some really poor choices. And so fast forward, I had a special education degree and then also a math degree. Worked in middle schools for the majority of my teaching career, and then went through kind of a more traditional path. Became a principal at both the secondary and the elementary level, and then worked at in Michigan. We have what's called the intermediate service or intermediate school districts. So I worked at a couple of those, and then served as a superintendent in a smaller district, and then now here in Farmington. I've been in Farmington for 6 years. I was the assistant superintendent for innovation prior to me becoming a superintendent 2 years ago.
Great, that's wonderful. So, as you have actually, that's a like an amazing career and a lot of varied, I would say, experiences, and it was interesting to hear how you actually got into this current role. As you're actually leading this district, and I know, like, you've in the past talked about going slow to go fast in terms of whenever there is a district transformation, and throughout your career, as you mentioned, right, like looking at various areas. Can you talk a little bit about when you're leading transformations, how, if there has been a specific moment where you felt like sometimes slowing down can actually accelerate meaningful change in the transformation process?
Yeah, so I appreciate that. I always think about the go slow to go fast. It's kind of an oxymoron because there's nothing slow about the work behind the scenes. It just appears that way, to the outside, and so that really gives you the space to be able to support those closest to the work in doing the work. And so as you think about, it isn't about everybody doing the same thing at the same time and the whole district or the whole school moving. It's who are those that are ready and know that they could do something different and get reach their students, in a better way. And so there might be pockets, and it might feel like there's 2 teachers here or 2 teachers there, but eventually they influence their colleagues, and then those colleagues influence others, and then it appears that nothing has happened, and then everything has happened. And I think about it as a brick wall, like you have an ice pick and you're a pick and you're picking through, and then there's a lot of little holes, and all of a sudden the wall falls down, and it looks like, oh, there was a wall, and now there isn't. But for me, it's more about it's those little moments, those little things you're doing each and every day, with those who are willing to be kind of the first follower, as you would say, and who are ready to step into this and learn together and really find the joy, quite frankly, again, in the teaching and in the teaching profession.
Yeah, that was an amazing analogy. I think a lot of times you sometimes don't see the progress actually happening in front, and then it's all happening and like individuals meetings and so on. So that's wonderful. So on the same topic, so how do you actually balance your tendency towards implementation with a need to actually step back? And you talked a lot about teachers as well, right? So how do you actually empower teachers and so that you let them lead rather than having to actually step in a lot of times?
I've worked with teachers in a variety of settings, even as a peer, really trying to think differently about the learning experience, even when I was a teacher. And I think that comes primarily from where I started as a teacher. I couldn't just do traditional things. It wasn't going to work all the way through. And so what I realized is that teachers have to be at the center of any of the work that we're doing, but they don't always want to make all the decisions, right? They really just want to have the resources that they deserve to have the time and space to be able to think and process and try new things. And it might work, it might not, have time to come together, kind of look at what it was that worked or didn't work, and then how do we build from what did work. And I think that's one piece that is unique is it isn't a one size fits all. This isn't a district top down decision. Everybody needs to do something. It's every building, you shared all of the different buildings we have. Every building has different strengths. So this is really a strength based approach. Where do people want to start? For example, we've been talking a lot about teachers not being isolated. And so that allows for teachers to work collaborative. So what does that look like? We have to make sure they have high quality curriculum materials. They have to have that. They shouldn't be looking for all of the materials themselves. That's not what they need. They need to vet them. They need to give us feedback, and then we need to implement them. But what they do have flexibility on is how they're going to structure their day. How do they work with their teammate? How do they work with people in the building where their strengths can come together to help our students? And so that's the difference, I think, is not just saying everybody has to do this. Not all of our buildings. They all have different families they're serving, different parts of our community. Again, different strengths in the adult. We need to capitalize on the strengths and then fill in what we need to do to ensure they have the time, the space, and the resources to do the work that they want to do and know that is right for kids.
Wonderful. Since you lead such a diverse district with so many buildings, it I'm sure like it poses interesting challenges of scale. So what you just talked about, how do you make sure that I'm sure like there are things that are happening in one building and you would want to replicate elsewhere. So how do you actually make those that diffusion of ideas and processes happen?
So we've worked really hard on building our adult learning culture. I think that there's this idea that teachers should walk in and know everything they need, or that we can just have one or two big days of PD and then send them on their way. And that's just not how kind of transforming the learning experience is going to happen. It needs to be ongoing. It needs to be an investment in them. We need to hear them. We need to ensure that the struggles, that we understand the struggles and we're providing solutions that actually will meet the needs of what they're looking for. And so there's a lot of collaboration on that. And so we've laid the groundwork for that. So now if we see something that's happening in a building and we think, oh, this other building might really benefit from that, our teachers are opening their doors. They're bringing their colleagues from another building in. They're asking good questions. They're learning from them. They won't go back and do it exactly the same way, but that kind of gives them some ideas of a peer's experience that they can then take into their context. So when we think about, how does this grow? It really grows organically. We also keep track of we have like influence tracker. So we talk to teachers all the time. How did you learn about this? Who's influencing you? It's not always somebody down the hall. It's a neighbor. It's somebody they're friends with who they might be an elementary teacher, but they're friends with high school folks. And so they're talking and communicating. So now that we realize that like who influences who and how do we manage that, we're really utilizing that to open open up the doors that elementary doesn't just learn from elementary teachers. Middle school teachers can learn from elementary can learn from high school. So again, not controlling it, but creating the space for that to happen so that when they're ready, they can go and learn from where they believe they're going to get what they need right at that.
Quite fascinating, and it almost feels like there is this social interaction and network map which is causing the information to flow. Yeah,
Yeah.
quite interesting.
Yeah.
So another thing I've been really looking forward to talking to you about was is this thing about the competency-based learning as a tool for equitable assessment. And what I learned was that recently your English department shifted from traditional grading to competency-based assessments. So can you talk a little bit about this approach, and then how what kind of philosophical differences are there about like what students can achieve and so on?
So when I first came into the district 6 years ago, we had a lot of conversations around equitable grading, and so there are a lot of different ways to approach it. One way that had been approached here is, there's these fixes, and just do these three, and then you'll have that grading, or you'll start down that path, and that just didn't translate the way maybe it was intended to around that. In part, because I don't think our educators at that time had an understanding of the skills and dispositions that students needed to be able to move forward in the curriculum. So we had to take a step back and help our teachers really understand, what is at the core of the instruction. And post COVID, we came up with an instructional model that's a bit unique. So it's more about positioning students in the center of the learning, making sure the learning is authentic to them, and then making sure that our students are noticed, heard, and feel like they belong. So that's a very non-traditional way to think about the instructional framework. And then we layered that with looking at how do we move from basic acquisition tasks to more meaning making, and then transferring it to a new context. So it's very, here you'll hear people talk about PAN and AMT. So that's really our instructional framework. And so that really was kind of the leap towards more thinking about competencies and competency based. And so as we started to think about what are the skills and dispositions, what's connected to our profile of a lifelong learner, our reimagined mission and vision, and what do we need? And so teachers started saying, like I don't know what a B needs, or what does an A mean? And they started to think about what are those skills that the students needed to have. As we started to bring teachers together and provide collaborative time during the day for them to meet, this interest in thinking more about competencies began to grow. And so fast forward to at our secondary level, we have a group, really wanting to now use that as a better communication tool to students and families, not just saying here's what a B is, but really saying, how do we know as educators where our students lie in the competency development, but also how can families support and better understand that? And where should we look at improving our instruction or making some changes because for whatever reason, there's a large group of students that haven't met the competencies. And so then we fast forward that to now a progression that we are developing, ensuring that every teacher can see themselves in the progression. Because if you are right at the beginning of this journey, we want to make sure that they know they belong. They belong in this process, and they are key in moving us forward. And so whether you're right at the beginning trying to, work out how do I do more small group targeted instruction, to, maybe I'm right at the middle and I'm ready to take that next jump. Everyone has a space and a place on the progression towards a competency-based system in Farmington.
Where do the standards actually play a role here in this system, and then how do you actually weave that into this kind of a instruction model?
Yeah, so as we again have taken teachers out of us isolation and working collaboratively and giving the space in the day for them to do that, they start to see how standards cross over. So if I am simply teaching social studies and I don't know what my English colleague is doing across the hall, then we're creating a lot more work for our students, a lot more work for us, versus saying there are ways that our standards can overlap or unite. And that way, that gives us more time to dig into those content areas versus feeling like we're competing. So that's what I'm hearing from educators is, once we started talking, there's a lot of connections between science and social studies. And what if we design a unit around the science unit and then everybody filled that in? How do we in our middle schools, if the science teacher needs some vocabulary development, I can do that as part of the ELA piece. So as they've started having time to talk about their standards, which they know very well, but especially in the secondary, they may not see the connections right away. But as they find those connections, they realize it is actually more meaningful learning for the students.
Yeah, there is that interlock between like different standards that actually comes into play. Very interesting. Uh, Can you talk about the story of maybe you must have seen a lot of students go through the old system and this the new competency based system. Can you talk a little bit about what might maybe a story of a student who might have actually fallen behind in the traditional system, but they really benefited from this kind of a system?
This year, I started meeting with students in all of their buildings over lunch and just having a representative group. And we were talking to them about, when we say success starts here, what does that mean to you? Or where do you see opportunities? And it's through those conversations that our students have been sharing, when I am in a music class, for example, or if I am in a CTE class, I know why I get the assessment or the grade that I get. But if I am in math, I don't always understand what that is. So our students have really been, for several years, giving us feedback that school feels repetitive. School feels, we do the same thing each hour. And they're really wanting to be, we have a student roundtable that's really committed to this reimagining learning. And what they're talking about is they want more project-based and problem-based learning. They want more time to work collaboratively instead of in isolation. So when I think about students who are left behind, we talk a little bit, we have them everywhere. Our system wasn't designed to meet the needs of each and every. And so as we talk to students, we can hear from them, the things that matter to them. And in a system where if they're just being pushed through, they're not really, again, it goes back to they're not noticed. They don't feel that they belong. The work isn't meaningful to them. And so as we move towards more making meaning and asking them to take those skills they learn and transfer them to a context close to them or meaningful to them, that's when we start to see kind of some of the traditional learning come together in such a more meaningful way for our students. But it is across the board. It doesn't matter if you're in our comprehensive high schools, our alternative high schools. All the students are looking for a connection to the learning in a real world context for them. And so that's what we're finding is that the traditional system, if it doesn't provide that, we see kids who struggle throughout the system very early on. And then it's just the system doesn't allow for recovery the way it's currently set up.
So I'm sure a lot of our listeners would be interested in um, learning about because it must have been a significant lift, right? Transitioning to a completely new system. So what did you find was one of the hardest challenges, right? Like there would have been major shifts in scheduling, instruction, teacher collaboration. So what from your perspective was one of the hardest things?
So I think the first thing I realized was we were asking teachers to do these Herculean efforts in transforming the learning experience without having curricular resources that were really going to help that happen. So that was one of the first, and that wasn't difficult, but it felt for educators to have to continue to, pilot programs, determine what we were going to purchase. And our educators, again, are a key piece to that. So we don't just say, here's a program, you guys are going to use that. We say, here's 3 or 4 that we want to look at. Teachers pilot it, they become the expert, they then speak with their colleagues, and then that's how we make a decision on a curriculum course. I think, and I spoke a little bit about the adult learning culture. And also really we're still in the process of making sure they have the time to work collaboratively and the support from their leaders. I think one piece that I'm really glad we did and proud of that is when we started on this journey, our leaders did the training and the PD that our teachers would get a year before, because it's very difficult for a leader to learn and lead at the same time. So we started a year ahead with them to make sure that they could process this different way of thinking about the learning experience. And then when the teachers came on board and we were working through this, they already knew what that felt like. And they knew that they knew the end. They knew where it was going to end up. I, I think, I think it was also kind of breaking through some of the traditional reinforcers. We have amazingly talented educators in our system, as I know all schools do. And so they were kind of praised and rewarded for very traditional practice. And so now they have to step back and not that what they were doing was wrong. It's just if we're moving to a different type of learning experience, that means we have to change some of the things. So how do you work through that change process? We talked a lot about, we have the endings and the new beginnings, but there's this neutral zone that we hang out with, and that's not very comfortable. And so a lot of work with our leaders, with all the adults in the organization, about letting go of some of these practices doesn't mean that you're not an exceptional educator. It means that you're willing to invest in the students in front of you and give them what they need and deserve. And we are here to help you, and you are in the center of that design. And I think thinking about it from that way, it is all hard work. And one thing I told all educators, this will not be easy. Don't think you're going into this and it's going to be easier. You're never going to work harder than you are, but the difference is the reward and what you see in the learning for the students that you serve. That is what makes it worth it.
Yeah, quite interesting. As you were talking about this thing, and I'm hearing more and more. It almost feels like uh, you are providing, you and your leaders are providing kind of a personalized professional development for teachers, just like they've been providing personalization learning for the students. So I know you talked a little bit about it, and then looking at some teachers who are in the beginning of the journey, and then some at the later stage, and some who are actually going through transformation. So, can you talk a little bit more about kind of intentional PD structures that you have put in place that might actually be helping with this kind of training?
Yeah, so for the last 4 years, we have had teachers come together and work in what was called investigations. And one day a month, they would come together with some outside consultants and take a current lesson plan or a unit plan and then move from the acquisition piece to meaning making. So we weren't asking them to jump into something new. We just said, take what you already have and make better. But we provided the support, the resources, the guidance, the celebrations, the kind of the push and the, to keep going. We provided technology tools to help them learn about how technology can help provide them feedback. So we did that. We started, with a small group of 20. We're now, over 200 of our teachers have gone through that process. And now we're ready to kind of launch into all of our schools. And this just happening all in our schools with that work. So we've been able to expand planning time across, our middle schools, some of our elementaries, some of our high school experiences. And again, we're going to continue to do that as teachers come fully on board again and are ready to run. So I think it's just really about, again, I'm a broken record on this, but teachers really at the center of this, us listening to teachers and what do they need? And not everybody needs the same things at the same time. And so we talk to our educators, our leaders, they think every year about how do I think differently about the structure of my building, how can I get more shared time and shared spaces? And that's really been how it's moved. I'm not going to say quickly, because we still have work to do, but we've created now this culture that is probably the closest to a coherence as far as everyone knows where we are going. They might not be ready to jump in yet, but they're very clear on the mission, the vision, and where we want to go with our profile.
As part of this transformation, right? Like I think you need to build teacher capacity to get them to the place where you actually want them to be, right? And the entire system to be in that place. So how do you actually go through that process whereby you you make sure that, okay, these are our goals this year, and then this is the capacity that we have for like these new initiatives and so on. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, so our professional development structure is probably very similar to other public. We have a contract we follow. There are some professional development days, and then we've worked to get them spread out through the school year. Some are district, I'll say, informed. Others are building informed, and those are spread out through the year. But we've also built a very large library of asynchronous learning that teachers can access anytime, right? When they are ready. So we have some required, but we also offer choice. And in those choices are things that we hear directly from our teachers. So we invest a lot in that type of professional learning and professional development. That is more the traditional. And then, like I said, we bring teachers in. We provide substitutes, and we have a strong commitment for getting teachers trained during the day on different initiatives. So it's making sure again that there's a good balance. When we implemented a new ELA program at our elementary, we made sure they had to come in on extra days. We made sure we compensated for that. It wasn't something that was voluntary, and we wanted to make sure they knew we valued them giving up their time and expertise. So I think and the other piece is again, being a large district, we have a lot of people kind of demand like wanting time for professional development. So our directors all coordinate the professional development. So while it may have a certain uh, flair of, maybe it's geared towards our EL learners or geared towards our students with special needs, it still focuses on our mission, our vision, our profile, and our instructional framework. So there is that coherency for our educators. And again, always having it on the ready for them at their own convenience, to be able to review or to take a peek at.
Another thing I learned was that you built intentional time into teacher schedules for conferencing with the student advisees. And with all the time pressures that we have, and I'm sure like teachers are dealing with, how do you protect that time? And what is actually what kind of conversations are actually happening in that space?
Great question. So there's a lot of work that went to that. Again, looking at readiness and then in expectation. So we started this really at our middle school level to get the teaming back there, had a consultant come in and talk about the power of teaming at the middle school level. And so that's really been our kind of our path moving forward as we expand into the elementary and the secondary. From the district lens, we allocate additional FTE to be able to have staff that can support so other staff can have that common time to plan. We are a PLC district that is very much part of who we are. So professional learning wasn't something new or, but we just needed to create the space. And so as we've done this at our elementary, middle school, and then starting this now in some of our high school areas, it's really the expectation is that you have this time to plan together, to work together. And that also includes focusing on student needs. And so it isn't time. Our teachers value that time. Our teachers use that time. And once we get them to see, as I shared earlier, the example of the ELA teacher and the history teacher saying, if we just switch some things around, it would be a lot easier for our students with the standards, the different centuries that we're learning about and those things. And so just them having that time to be able to do that is going to makes a difference for our students. And I think that I see the time so valuable. And I think it's so important that it's not extra, it's necessary. And we're not there yet where everyone has the time that they deserve, but we're moving in that direction each year more and more, especially with our teachers who have been willing to kind of jump in, even though they're not sure where all this is going to end up. So we want to make sure we're supporting them with with the time that they need to do this incredible work and to be able to then expand it with their peers.
So now let's move to another topic on scaling instructional technology while maintaining teacher agency. And I know that you talked a little bit about it in terms of how you figure out which solutions to use by doing multiple pilots and getting feedback. Now, in today's day and age, our conversation would be complete without talking about AI. So, and I know like there must be a lot of like AI powered tools and platforms that you must be evaluating. So, can you talk a little bit about like what kind of approach that you take and what might be some of the non-negotiables when you are evaluating a new solution?
Yes. So great question. We were one district that when other districts around us were kind of you can't use AI's tools. We did not do that. We went the other way. And we really embraced that. We were talking to students and realizing students were already using AI well before us adults knew that it was even out there. And so what our technology department created was an AI vetting tool. And so instead of us teachers saying, we want this tool, we want to use this tool, and us just saying no or yes for what appeared to them a random reason, we asked them if they had a tool that they were interested in to use the vetting tool to be able to understand why the tool may or may not be one that could be supported in the district. And then, worked with our data privacy agreements and, had some bumps along the way. But the difference was that it wasn't a district, directed initiative. Each teacher could look at tools and if they, vetted properly and met our data privacy expectations, then we definitely would consider that. And that I think was a better way, not only just to get tools in front of our kids that we knew were safer, it allowed teachers not to like to have a better understanding of AI's value. And so then from there, we created kind of rubrics for educators on where AI works best, where maybe you don't want to make that as your first choice, just to give them some examples if they were new to this type of technology. And so as we go through, when we hear from teachers something and it passes through the vetting, we do some piloting and then want to see, what were the results. And that's the piece is getting the teachers, feedback on that. Sometimes they'll say, yeah, that didn't do what I thought it would do, or I don't need it to do that. I need it to do this, but it doesn't. So, or saying, wow, this is really helping me as an educator. And that's what we want to hear. So we're still in the AI journey, but we decided to educate and allow a space for our teachers to learn about these tools and understand when we have to vet them versus the district just taking control single-handedly and saying yes or no.
Yeah, yeah, it's very important to actually have teachers' voice in the decision making because at the end they are the ones who are going to be using the tools every day, right? So that's wonderful. Uh, can you share an example of a technology pilot that you thought was quite successful, or could be on the other side as well, or fail in your district, and what determined whether it scaled or whether it was actually discontinued?
So Farmington was not a one-to-one district until COVID. So that was an interesting dynamic. So during COVID, a lot of tech tools flooded in, obviously, because they needed them. So I think right now we're in the process of those tech tools that we initially used. Are they actually fulfilling now the purpose that we wanted? And if they are, then we continue. And if they're not, then we will stop. We've been working through some tools for primarily math and ELA, and there have been some that have been great. And the students, again, their feedback is important, and they're taking on. Some are The majority, I'm going to say, are supplemental resources. There's some, most of them are not the core resource. They're all a supplement. So we just look through, and is it still meeting the needs? And we do program reviews every year on all of our tools, whether it's, textbook or the programs, the technology programs, and make sure that they're meeting the needs that we have. We also try out a lot of things in small sections of the district so that it's not all, we don't have this huge investment in everything all at once until we have some pretty solid data. And then we're very specific on who the population is that will serve. So we have a pretty, I'll say sometimes companies might get frustrated with Farmington because we don't just jump all in with say, let's try this. Where's the best place we could try? Making sure we have people who would implement with fidelity and then give us some honest feedback on where this might work. If it's not here, is it anywhere else in our district? So we've been, we are, as a partner, we are pretty particular. And I think that as our teachers, they have been part from the beginning and their voices at the center, again, that, with everything we're doing, and that we don't just jump in and the whole district has to do this thing, but where do we start? And then how do we know it works and for who is it going to work for?
That's very important because that I think really makes a difference in terms of whether something succeeds or not, especially because once you have like some stakeholders and champions inside, then actually that makes a big difference.
Yeah.
So yeah, so thanks. Uh, now let's talk about and we are an assessments company, and so I'm always curious about this thing. So with this new competency based system, what role do you see of like assessments and feedback tools in this entire system?
I think that we are always looking for an assessment tool that can give teachers real time data that will help them move the learning forward. One of the things we are very focused on is acceleration of learning experiences. And any partner that we partner with is for the sole purpose of accelerating learning, not replacing it, not doing something different, but truly accelerating the learning and the learning experiences for every child in our district. So that's really the lens that we come at it. There's a lot of tools out there. There's a lot of data that's coming, but is it the data and the information that our teachers need in real time to be able to make informed decisions on, what's next for their students sitting right? That's really our biggest focus. It's fine to have data, but if it's not going to help our teachers be able to move the needle and accelerate the learning experience, then it wouldn't have a space. That wouldn't be a tool that we would.
Cool. This was a very interesting discussion. As we actually bring the discussion to a close, I would love to do like a lightning round just to hear a few things. So, uh, can you tell us about your leadership style?
My leadership style is collaborative, it's compassionate, and it's courageous.
Any recent books that you've read that you would like to share with my listeners?
Oh, our cabinet is in the process of reading Leadership on the Line,
No.
really thinking about the difference between the types of leadership moves that we need to be making and how are we really leading um, meaningful change.
And as our education system is going through a major transformation, and like the new teachers coming in, what suggestion do you have for new teachers who are coming into the system?
I believe, and my experience has been, and I've heard from newer teachers that they said we would be able to do this in college. We didn't know we really could. So I think oftentimes we worry that they're not ready. I believe they are ready, and we just have to create the conditions for them. So just ask that they jump in, that they are open and honest with their feedback, and that they help us move to that next level.
Wonderful. So that's it, listeners. I would like to thank Dr. Coffin again for being with us and sharing wonderful insights. And Thank you. Thank you very much. Have a story, question, or insight from your own classroom or campus? We would love to hear from you. Thanks for tuning in to the Magna AI podcast. Be sure to follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube and learn more at magnaeducation.ai. Because when we support teachers with the right tools, we unlock what's possible for every learner.